A distress signal summoned Earth's most dangerous fleet. They sent the distress signal 5 minutes ago. Now, every fleet admiral in the galaxy is praying it wasn't answered. High Commander Tucker of the Veldari Dominion felt his subharmonic nerves tremble, a deep, instinctive reaction to the unfolding catastrophe. The war room aboard the Dominion dreadnought Valkyries buzzed with frantic energy as officers struggled to interpret the readings flashing across their holodisplays. The signal had originated from Outpost Tarsus 3, a fringe research station on the edge of uncharted space. It was supposed to be a minor facility, barely worth the Dominion's attention. Yet, the moment the signal went out, the entire sector plunged into silence. "Patch me through to Tarsus 3, Tucker barked. His second-in-command hesitated, then shook his head. "Sir, they're gone." No response. Not even wreckage. The silence in the war room was suffocating. Tucker turned to the holographic projection of the star system. Something had answered that distress call. And whatever it was, it wiped out Tarsus 3 in minutes. Then the first fleet signatures arrived. Immediate danger. On the edges of the Veldari sensor range, an impossible number of vessels were appearing out of void space. At first they seemed like background anomalies, sensory errors. But then the sheer scope became apparent. Thousands. More than 100 dreadnought-class ships. Cruisers. Assault carriers. Entire swarms of smaller crafts, blinking into existence in perfect formation. "By the void," an officer whispered. "That's not a response fleet. That's an extermination armada." Tucker felt a chill claw up his spinal ridges. There was only one species in the galaxy that operated like this. One species that didn't send help, they sent wrath. The humans had answered the call. Unbreakable bond forming. "Raise them," Tucker ordered, voice tight. "We need to explain that we had no part in this." "They're already hailing us," an officer said grimly. Tucker braced himself as the comm screen flickered. Then the image of a human filled the display. His face was lined with years of command, his uniform crisp, but his eyes, their cold, unrelenting gaze, were the first real confirmation that this was not a diplomatic engagement. "This is Fleet Admiral Ryan Dorn of the Terran Vanguard," the human said. His tone was calm, but the weight behind it was absolute. "Outpost Tarsus 3 transmitted a distress call. His people are gone. Who is responsible?" Tucker's mandibles flexed involuntarily. The human spoke as if he already knew the answer. "We don't know," Tucker admitted. "We detected the signal moments before your arrival." A new transmission cut through the channel. This one wasn't directed at them, it was a broadcast. The Dominion's computers intercepted the transmission and force-fed the raw data onto the main screen. Video footage. And what they saw turned Tucker's blood to ice. Tarsus 3's final moments played in excruciating clarity. Scientists and civilians running for their lives. Shadowed figures tearing through corridors, rending flesh and bone. Bodies littering the ground, their final expressions frozen in silent screams. And then, an unmistakable insignia. A Veldari Dominion war crest, painted onto the armor of the attackers. Tucker's breath stopped. His mind reeled. This was impossible. He hadn't authorized this. No one had. But the humans wouldn't care. Admiral Dorn's voice returned, quiet but final. "Then you are complicit." The comms cut out. The first wave of Terran dreadnoughts began their burn toward the Dominion fleet. Tucker barely had time to process the accusation before his officers erupted into chaos. Some shouted denials, others scrambled to pull fleet formations into a defensive stance. But none of it would matter. The Terran fleet wasn't moving with hesitation. They were moving with intent. "Commander," an officer yelped. "We're being targeted." Before the sentence finished, the first Terran dreadnought opened fire. A devastating lance of particle energy speared through the void, slamming into the Veldari cruiser Juanka. The shields collapsed in an instant, the hull superheated, and then, detonation. The ship split in half as secondary explosions rippled through its frame like blood vessels bursting in an organism. The fireball expanded into space, consuming escape pods before they could fully launch. Tucker had seen planetary sieges, orbital bombardments, even Dominion civil wars. Nothing compared to this. "This is insanity," his second-in-command shrieked. "We have to explain." Tucker silenced him with a raised claw. No, there was no explaining. There was only surviving. Full fleet-wide broadcast. Tucker barked. "Do not return fire. All ships, initiate evasive maneuvers and break formation. We need distance." But as the Dominion fleet scattered, the Terrans adjusted with mechanical precision. Emotionally gut-wrenching moments. Talker's ship, the Valkyries, shuddered as kinetic slugs ripped through the void around them. The Dominion's greatest warship wasn't even being prioritized. The Terrans were methodically dismantling the Veldari from the outside in, carving through the weaker ships before they even considered the dreadnoughts. Every distress beacon, every emergency call from Veldari captains rang through Talker's comms. Begging for orders. Begging for mercy. And there was none. A frantic message from the Jean Tour, a Dominion escort frigate, flickered to life. On screen, Captain Velka clutched her console, her fur matted with sweat. "Commander," she gasped. "Our engines are dead, life support failing." Before she could finish, an unseen projectile obliterated the bridge. The transmission cut to black. The Jean Tour erupted into a debris field of bodies and shattered metal. Talker's claws dug into the command console. His people were dying like prey. Unexpected twist. And then, suddenly, the Terran fleet halted. Weapons ceased fire. Missile locks disengaged. The dreadnoughts loomed motionless in the dark void. A silence stretched across the battlefield, broken only by the static of burning wreckage. Talker's mandibles clicked in confusion. What were they waiting for? Then his sensors picked up a new signature. A single Terran ship, no larger than a cruiser, breaking from the armada and moving toward them. It wasn't a warship. It wasn't a gunboat. It was a transport. And it was carrying something. Cliffhanger ending. The Valkyries' sensors managed a partial scan before the Terran encryption locked them out. But what little data came through was terrifying. Life signs. Not human. Veldari. Talker's heart froze. The humans had captives. And now they were delivering them. The Terran transport moved with eerie precision, gliding through the wreckage of the Dominion fleet like a predator inspecting a wounded animal. No escort ships flanked it, no weapons were primed. It was an open invitation. Talker knew a trap when he saw one. "Scan it again," he ordered, his voice tight. His sensor officer shook his head. "They're scrambling our deeper scans. But the readings confirm it, there are Veldari life signs aboard." Talker's mandibles flexed in agitation. Captives. His people. But why? Why take prisoners when the Terrans were wiping out Dominion ships with ruthless efficiency? "They want us to board," his second-in-command murmured. Talker knew the officer was right. The humans weren't responding to hails. Their fleet remained motionless. Waiting. This wasn't a rescue. It was a message. The weight of the moment pressed down on him. If he went, he might be stepping into an execution. If he didn't, the humans would burn every last Dominion ship in the sector. His claws curled into a fist. There was no choice. A glimmer of hope. Talker exhaled sharply and turned to his bridge crew. "Prepare a boarding shuttle." "I'm going." The crew stiffened in shock. His second-in-command practically lurched forward in protest. "Commander, this is madness." "It's our only chance," Talker growled. "If the humans wanted us dead, we'd already be dead." A tense silence followed. No one argued further. Minutes later, Talker's shuttle peeled away from the Valkyries, maneuvering toward the Terran vessel. It was small compared to the hulking dreadnoughts behind it, but the raw presence of the Terran fleet still radiated like a silent storm, barely contained. As the shuttle docked, Talker tightened his grip on his plasma rifle. He didn't expect to walk back out of this ship alive. The airlock opened. The chamber beyond was dim, illuminated only by red emergency lights. The first thing Talker noticed was the silence. No welcoming party. No immediate execution. Just a long, empty corridor. A mechanical voice echoed from unseen speakers. "Proceed forward." Unarmed. Talker hesitated, then slowly holstered his rifle. He was at their mercy now. He moved deeper into the ship, every step measured, every breath controlled. The ship was utilitarian, human ships always were, but this one had a cold efficiency. No decorative banners. No symbols of rank. Just a place designed for function and nothing else. Then he reached the chamber. And his heart stopped. The animal's truth revealed. The room was large, lined with reinforced glass cells. Veldari prisoners filled them. They were alive. Some were researchers from Tarsus 3. Others were soldiers. Some. He recognized. Talker's throat tightened. Admiral Sholvar stood in the largest cell, his eyes dark with something between exhaustion and shame. Sholvar had gone missing over a cycle ago, declared lost in an ambush with the Avanti pirates. But now he was here. Talker took a step forward, his voice low. "Sholvar?" Before the Admiral could respond, another voice cut through the chamber. "You recognize them, don't you?" Talker turned. Admiral Ryan Dorn stood at the entrance, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. The tension in the air shifted instantly. Tucker straightened, his instincts screaming at him to be ready for anything. Why take prisoners? You slaughtered my fleet but spared these? Why? Dorn stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back. Because they had a story to tell. He pressed a button on his wrist. The hollow projector flickered to life. And then, Tucker saw everything. Tarsus 3. But not the attack. No, this was before. The footage showed Veldari soldiers storming into the research facility weeks before the distress call. Dominion commandos, their insignias unmistakable, rounding up human scientists at gunpoint. Dragging them out of view. Executing some where they stood. Tucker's blood ran cold. This is falsified, he breathed. The Dominion would never. Dorn didn't speak. He simply pressed another button. A new hollow recording appeared. A familiar voice filled the chamber. We've secured the humans. Command will be pleased. Their research on bioweapon applications is more advanced than we expected. Once we extract the data, we'll erase the station. Tucker knew that voice. It was Sholvar. His throat clenched. He turned to the captured admiral, searching for some sign that this was a trick. But Sholvar's gaze was already lowered. Tucker took a step back. This was sanctioned? Sholvar exhaled slowly. By the High War Council itself. Tucker swayed, his world fracturing. His own government had orchestrated the massacre. The Dominion hadn't been attacked first. They had been the aggressors. Cliffhanger ending. Tucker turned back to Admiral Dorn, who stood watching him with icy calculation. The Veldari commander squared his shoulders, forcing steel back into his voice. If this is true, then why not present it to the galactic courts? Why not demand reparations? Dorn's next words were soft. Final. Because we don't negotiate with murderers. Tucker barely had time to react before the entire ship shook. An explosion ripped through the docking bay. Dorn's expression didn't change. He had been expecting this. Tucker spun as the ship's comms crackled to life. His second-in-command's panicked voice rang out. Commander. The Dominion High Fleet has arrived. They're ordering all forces to annihilate the humans. Dorn's voice was quiet. Too quiet. I suggest you make a choice, Tucker. On the hollow display, the Veldari reinforcements poured in by the thousands. The war was about to escalate. The ship shuddered violently as another explosion ripped through the docking bay. Alarms wailed across the Terran vessel. Through the viewport, Tucker saw the impossible. The Dominion High Fleet had arrived. A wall of warships stretched across the void, their hulls gleaming in the dying embers of the battlefield. Hundreds of capital ships, dreadnoughts, and destroyers. The full might of the Dominion had come, and they had one purpose, to bury the truth beneath fire and destruction. On the command deck of the Terran transport, Admiral Ryan Dorn barely reacted to the sudden shift in the war. He stood, arms folded, as though he had been expecting this very outcome. This is it, he said. The moment that decides whether your people live or die, Commander. Tucker's throat tightened. His claws curled into fists. He had spent his life believing in the Dominion's strength, its honor. But now he saw it clearly. The High Fleet hadn't come to save him. They had come to erase him. The truth had to die. And he, along with it. But the humans weren't running. Dorn stepped forward, his voice calm but edged with something sharp. Something final. We don't have time for debates. You have two choices. Tucker forced himself to meet Dorn's gaze. Which are? Dorn turned to the viewport. The Terran fleet was already in motion. Dreadnoughts shifted into battle formations. Gunships surged forward, missile locks painted the incoming Dominion warships. It was a standoff of impossible scale. 1. Dorn continued, you return to your people, swear loyalty to your High Fleet, and die with them in a war they cannot win. Tucker's mandibles twitched. And the second? Dorn's expression was cold steel. You fight with us. Tucker's heart pounded. You're asking me to betray my people. Dorn shook his head. No, Commander. Your people are in those cells. The ones on those ships. They just tried to kill you. The ship lurched violently as Dominion railgun fire streaked past, barely missing the hull. The war had seconds before erupting into full-scale annihilation. Tucker looked back at the prisoners, the Veldari survivors. The ones who had been left behind. The ones the Dominion had abandoned. His decision came like a breath of fire. No, he whispered. I will not fight for the Dominion. He turned to Dorn. But I will not fight for you either. Dorn's eyes narrowed. Then what will you fight for? Tucker exhaled. For them. And with that he moved. The final betrayal. Talker spun toward the command console and slammed a command into his wristcom. Across the battlefield, Veldari ships received an unauthorized transmission. A single message. A single order. Stand down. Do not fire. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then chaos. Veldari warships froze in their formations. Some captains hesitated. Others began shouting over comms. The High Fleet's commanders barked orders for them to continue their attack. Some obeyed. But others, too many others, did not. The war erupts. The Dominion High Fleet, realizing what had just happened, opened fire. Veldari turned on Veldari. Some followed the High Council's orders, raining hellfire upon the Terrans. But others, those who had received Talker's signal, hesitated. Some tried to flee. Others outright refused to engage. And the humans? They seized the moment. Dorn didn't hesitate. The Terran fleet surged forward like predators unleashed. Dreadnoughts carved through Dominion ranks. Fighters screamed through the wreckage, unleashing railgun fire and plasma bursts. Veldari ships, weakened by their own hesitation, began falling in droves. Talker watched the destruction unfold, his decision sealed. He wasn't Dominion anymore. But he wasn't human either. The sacrifice. The ship's AI crackled to life. Enemy flagship locking onto our coordinates. Talker turned to see it. The Dominion High Fleet's command carrier. The most powerful warship in the sector. And it had just targeted them. Dorn's voice was calm. They're going to wipe this ship off the field. Talker knew what had to be done. He turned toward the captured Veldari prisoners. Get them out of here. Get them to safety. Dorn's brow furrowed. And you? Talker stepped toward the viewport, toward the final battle. I will end this. And with that he activated the ship's manual override. Legendary ending. The Terran ship suddenly surged forward. Talker had just set its trajectory on a collision course, straight for the Dominion High Fleet's command carrier. The Veldari warship began charging its main cannon. It wouldn't matter. Because Talker wasn't stopping. Dorn's voice crackled over the comms. Talker, if you do this... It's already done, Talker said. His voice was calm. Steady. Through the viewport he saw the end of the war approaching. The Dominion had been rotting from within. He had seen it firsthand. This was not an empire worth saving. The High Council would never stop hunting the truth. They would never stop hunting the humans. But if the command carrier fell? If the High Fleet's leadership was wiped out? Then the war would die with them. Talker exhaled, mandibles clicking in finality. And then, the Terran ship struck the Dominion flagship. A blinding explosion consumed the command carrier. The High Fleet's backbone shattered in an instant. Talker closed his eyes, feeling the fire consume everything. Epilogue. Weeks later. Veldari ships, leaderless and fractured, had no choice but to withdraw. The war had ended, not in negotiations, not in surrender, but in destruction. The truth about the Dominion's crimes had been broadcast across the galaxy. What remained of the High Council fled, their empire crumbling from within. And the Terrans? They did not claim victory. They did not declare conquest. They simply left. Veldari survivors, the ones who had been betrayed by their own kind, now found themselves at the mercy of the humans they had once feared. And Admiral Ryan Dorn? He merely watched the stars, a quiet satisfaction in his gaze. One of his officers approached. Sir, the Dominion is finished. Dorn nodded once. Good. The officer hesitated. Commander Talker? Dorn exhaled. His gaze flickered toward a single unmarked memorial beacon drifting in the wreckage. A tribute to a Veldari who had made the ultimate choice. He turned away. We move out. And with that, Earth's most dangerous fleet disappeared into the void. The end.